Hey you, welcome back. So we're picking up the story where we left off yesterday with the reign of King Asa and all the things going on in Judah and in Israel. So let's just jump right back in. So while Asa ruled in Judah, Israel went through 7 kings. Israel's throne was clearly unstable. It lacked a divinely appointed royal line. It seemed that anyone who had military power, who was born of a certain class, or who just received a prophetic anointing could just claim the throne and, be king. So let's get into some of the kings that Israel had. So after Baasha's death, his dynasty only lasted a year and was usurped by Zimri, who reigned for only 7 days. Imagine that. They had a king that reigned for a week. Although his reign was short, he fulfilled the prophet Jehu's prophecy against the house of Baasha and wiped out his entire family, including friends who were liable to rise up and avenge their death. So he killed basically everyone that was connected to him. Omri was made king by the Israelites, but only half of them. The others installed Tibni as king. But that's all we ever heard, because we just heard, and then he died. So he died soon after. Omri reigned for 4 generations because he too, Omri reigned for 4 generations. However, he appeared to be very influential and politically savvy, because we could see some of the things that he did, the places that he built up, and the alliances that he built. I even heard that some archaeologists dug up some obelisk that had his name on it. So probably was maybe a big deal back then. But he was, despite his political savviness and all of that, he was a bad king, because he too, like the others before him, supported idol worship. He was also known as the king who bought the land of Samaria. So Samaria actually came because he bought it, named it after the person that he bought it for, but he bought it as a defense for Israel, as a place of defense, since it was a high place. His son Ahab succeeded him, and in 1631 we learn that violations of God's law reached new heights under his reign, meaning if you thought the others were bad, Ahab was badder. If there's any word like that, he was worse. He married Jezebel. Everyone knows Jezebel. We just touched on her. We'll come into full details of her. But what I will say was that she was a chief priestess of the cult of Baal worship in Tyre. Ahab built a temple for Baal and worshipped him. He also gave Baal's prophets political status in Israel at the time. Now, do you remember Joshua's curse? When the people of Israel when God helped the people of Israel to bring down the walls of Jericho before they entered into the promised land. That was the curse in Joshua 6:26, where he says anyone who attempts to build it will build it. The foundation will be laid by their firstborn, and the gates will be set up by their lastborn. Well, in 1634, we find out about Hiel of Bethel, was the person who fulfilled this prophecy. He built Jericho and the curse came upon him. His first son died while he was building the foundation, and his last son died when he set up the gates. Now, the rebuilding of Jericho was evidence of how far the Israelites had distanced themselves from God, because as long as they obeyed God's commandment, Jericho ought never to have been rebuilt. But now that they've rebuilt it, it shows that they have completely lost it. Now, back in Judah, Jehoshaphat succeeded Asa as king, and he was a good king. He didn't follow the false gods, but walked in the way of his great grandfather David. The Lord was with Jehoshaphat, and his kingdom was established with great honor and riches. God blessed him with peace, wealth, and he even had foreign tribute. While Jehoshaphat reigned peacefully with God in Judah, the worship of Baals in the north was increasing with Ahab and Jezebel. Jehoshaphat sent priests throughout Judah just to ensure that the people knew God. He sent the priests round, and the Levites round the land of Judah with the book of the law, teaching the people God's law. So for how long or how far they had strayed to God, Jehoshaphat made this effort to make sure that everyone knew. So imagine that if the town was like overrun with perhaps like Jehovah's Witnesses knocking on every door, but these were priests telling the children of Israel about God. I thought that was amazing. Just imagine a land, where the king was making sure and making it imperative that the children of God in the land knew about their God. Even his enemies were impacted by the way that he ruled with dignity and honor. Did you notice in the part where it says even the Philistines were Israel's arch enemies, they brought tribute to him? That just goes to show how, amazing God, or the amazing work that God was doing through Jehoshaphat at the time. Now here's my hashtag getting to know God moment. God is sovereign over our enemies. Go figure. He has the ability to make those who hate us to be at peace with us, just like we saw here. In 2 Chronicles 17:10, it says, "And the fear of the Lord fell on the kingdoms of the land that were around Judah, so that they did not make war against Jehoshaphat." That's what God can do. That's what God does. And it reminds me of another saying that we read, if you remember, in Proverbs 17, that says, "When the Lord takes pleasure in anyone's way, he causes his enemies to make peace with them." How amazing is that? I mean, after reading this, I just said a prayer in my heart that, God, please let all my enemies and all those who don't like me for whatever reason just find themselves making peace with me. Thank you for joining me today. Tomorrow we'll continue the story with 1 Kings 17 to 19. So read, come prepared, and I will be sharing my lessons here. Have a wonderful day. Bye.